Hello, I'm Cameron Coates, the online editor of Radio Inc. magazine, and welcome to Catching Z's, a wake-up call for recruiting radio's next generation, our latest in the Radio Masters sales series. So happy you could join us today because I'm very excited to have this guest on the series. As president and CEO of RAB, Mike Hulvey leads radio's advocacy efforts by helping to drive business, grow advertising revenue, and communicate radio's digital transformation and help attract new sales talent through recruitment and training efforts. Hulvey joined the organization back in April 2024. Before RAB, Mike was CEO at Neuhoff Communications, which owned and operated 20 radio stations in Illinois and Indiana and their digital properties. Mike, welcome. Happy to have you here today.
Cameron, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to catch up on some Z's. Although This is not the rest kind of Z's. This is the kind of Z's that energize you and drive you. And so I'm excited about the topic for sure.
That's right. Well, it's a hot day. It's a hot topic. So, we might as well jump right in. I guess the big question, and I guess, depending on how you answer this really short webinar, do the kids really want to work in radio? I feel like that's a comment we get all too often on the Radio Inc. headlines.
Okay, here's the bad news, good news. Okay, the bad news is this webinar is going the full distance. The good news is they absolutely do. It has been, and we'll talk about it in the course of our discussion today. But the RAB in our annual campus programs, we have had some really successful engagement this summer in Georgia and in Illinois. In that time, we are immersed in Gen Z. We're talking about the future, and what we're seeing. I like to use the term, Cameron, on-air lights. We're seeing on-air lights on. We're seeing people engaged. We're seeing young people that are excited about our business, but it may not be in the ways that we've always thought about in the traditional sense. And I think that's part of our discussion today.
I mean, that is a unique viewpoint. That's why I wanted to bring you in, because you've had a lot of great experience here, even in just the past few months, talking with kids at the National Radio Talent Institutes and at NAB Show 2025. And, I guess, the question is, who is going to be the next Erica Farber? That's what we ask, kind of, who's going to be the next great seller? Because they're out there. It's just a matter of finding them and bringing them in. Tell us about the conversations that you've been having here in the last few months.
Sure. Let's go back to, and you brought up two really key touch points. For the industry, RAB is really excited to be involved in that space. The Student Scholar Program is an extension of that the RAB Board of Directors, along with the BEA, I think this was, I'm going to say year 14. It may be a little bit longer than that. Again, I got to give a tip of the cap to Jeff Warshaw at Connoisseur, because we were in a board meeting, an RAB board meeting a number of years ago, and I'm speaking at this point as a board member. We were discussing what do we have to do to bring young people into the business. We were using the reference point, the radio show, and seeing some of our attendees that were getting a little long in the tooth, if you will, and didn't have that energy level. We were like, they were missed. And so during an RAB board meeting, Jeff said to Erica Farber, what do we have to do to bring this new energy into the industry, and in particular to our national event? And the idea was, well, let's break down a barrier and let's provide a financial, break down the financial barrier and provide, if you will, stipends, or if you will, provide scholarships so that college students can attend. In about 20 minutes, we raised enough money at that board meeting, just in show of hands. It was, Erica had a piece of paper, literally unplanned. It just happened. And in about 20 minutes, Cameron, we raised enough money from broadcasters, from radio broadcasters, members of the RAB board, to support over 100 college students to attend that next year's radio show. And then it began, and it's still going on. And as a part of that, working with BEA with specific programming, we're matching broadcaster and college student, who then becomes the next generation of employee. We're hearing what they have to say. We're hearing their excitement. We're also hearing some of their trepidation. And we're able to create these magical moments. Well, again, just a few months ago in April, in Las Vegas, we had 103 college students who were financially supported from the RAB, involved in panel discussions, involved in mentor matchups, involved in just hallway conversations. And they're interested. They want to be in this business. Then fast forward, as you said, to the NRTS, the National Radio Talent System. And in Georgia, our Radio Talent Institute. In Illinois, our Media Career Academy. And we had almost 50 students who participated in hands-on week-long training and interaction with broadcasters. And their level of excitement for what they see as the future is not diminished. And it's not like, no, I want nothing to do with this. The new multi-platform approaches, the new technologies, the way we interact with our audiences, the way we interact with our communities, because purpose is very important with Generation Z, as it should be with everybody. They see a bright future and a way to connect. So through these conversations, Cameron, we're hearing about the excitement level and that they see real possibilities. They're also consumers. And so when we hear this generation doesn't care about radio, they're not consuming our content, not true. Absolutely not true.
And I think when a lot of people see the Radio Talent Institutes, they think, oh, it's just for talent. But they go through the sales programs. But actually, I want you to share a story that you shared with me. Not only is it just, you're not just people that want to be on air, but tell us about Stephanie.
Stephanie. So Stephanie is an incoming senior at Illinois State University in Normal, Illinois. And the Career Academy that was underwritten by the Illinois Broadcasters Foundation was held in Bloomington, Normal, Illinois. And Stephanie is a student who works at her local or at her campus radio station. She is very, very enthusiastic. And what was immediately apparent, Cameron, was she had an interest in data, and she specifically had an interest in traffic. So Stephanie begins talking to us. Jeff Schmidt from the RAB was there day one, because part of our programs in both Georgia and in Illinois, as well as our past programs, is certification is earned by the attending students. And so it was great in Illinois. Jeff Schmidt, one of the best presenters there are, he's energizing the group. Stephanie, gets a break and she starts asking questions about traffic, and not, on the 10s traffic, but actual traffic. And it's like, wow, why are you so interested in traffic? She goes, I'm the traffic manager of my station. I want to make sure that it's done right. I want to make sure that our bills are right. Now, this is a student. This is an incoming senior. For those that are watching, I'll be happy to connect you with Stephanie, because that's the kind of person you want on your team. So fast forward, every guest we had, at the Career Academy in Normal, Illinois, she was, they had a broadcast background. She's asking questions about their traffic procedures, their software, their approaches. Like, she was really, and I should say is really interested in the topic. So this was the magic moment. We are on Thursday of our program. We take the students from our, on campus, if you will, off campus location, and we take them to the city of Chicago. So we're in a motor coach. We're heading up Interstate 55 in Illinois, and Stephanie comes over. I'm in the middle of the bus talking to the students, just loving the energy. Stephanie comes over and she sits down and she goes, we use Wide Orbit. And I want to know, do you know anyone who could help me? There's some things that I don't fully understand with our software, and I would like to, I'd love to be able to connect with someone, that maybe And I said, Stephanie, hold on one second. So Cameron, guess what I did? I immediately sent a note to Susie Hedrick, the president of Wide Orbit. And Susie, and I explained what was going on. Again, this is like this was an email, but she responded instantly. I told her about Stephanie. I told her about the question, what we were doing. And she was like, I'm all in. Connect me to Stephanie. So within about 5 minutes, Stephanie then starts having an outreach to Susie at Wide Orbit. And that conversation and that connection has moved on. Like, how cool is that? And the cool moment, that was cool. But what was like really cool was I heard Stephanie calling her station manager, which is the faculty member who oversees the broadcast program. And she goes, I just got a contact. Yes, it's the president of the company. So here was a college student who wanted to learn more, who wants to be better. Remember what I said? She wants to make sure her bills are right.
Yeah.
And Susie, as every professional that I know, like I don't know anyone in this industry who would not like respond, like they want to help the next generation. So that was such a cool moment. I just love that. And it was traffic. We ended up at Cumulus in Chicago. John Guerin, Stephanie, the general manager of WLS, and again, Stephanie, the student, she raised her hand. Her first question, Cameron, was about traffic.
Let me guess. Yeah.
But here's this, because I hear what's happening with our attendees. Well, what about AI? What about AI? Guess what her first round of questions were? How is AI going to impact this? But how can I work within the AI structure? Because it's something that she's passionate about. So that was worth the entire week of our efforts, at the Illinois Media Career Academy that the RAB produced with the Illinois Broadcasters Foundation. So that, my friend, was a really cool moment.
That is amazing. That's one of those things I want everyone to let that sink in. Not only not on air, but in traffic. I think that's a pretty darn good sign of the industry's health. So, but one of the things is that the old pitch doesn't quite work with Gen Z. And I think that's where a lot of folks are having problems putting together a new pitch to get Gen Z to come in and work in radio sales and in the behind the scenes departments and even sometimes on air. What are some pitches that you are seeing work at RAB?
Yeah, approaches.
Yes.
Maybe, as an example. And I've got a couple of, I won't name the names, but if you will, a couple of case examples of that. And you're right, Gen Z is different. I mean, every generation is different. We hear that. I like to say I am 60 on the outside, but I'm 35 on the inside. So I know I might look like an old man to some, but believe me, young on the inside and always looking to learn more. And as a Gen Xer, I guess, there was the great mystery. How do we solve the Gen Y? And there was the Gen Y guy and all this training around Gen Y. And then, well, here comes Gen Z as Gen Y moves into middle age. Let that sink in too. But Gen Z is very, as every generation is, but is very specific. And there's some things that are very important to them. There's a piece that is available at rab.com. And if you go to rab.com and in the search bar, you click Gen Z, there is a big list of resource material that comes up. But one of those was a article that was published in November of last year, and it deals with the premise of we're not lazy, like Gen Z, we're not lazy. We want to try harder. Like this is a generation that wants to learn, and in some of the other materials, you see examples from studies where their Gen Z knows they're like a little behind, but they're willing to try harder. They're willing to do new things, but they also want to live in a little bit different world than what we've lived in. And the world of work has changed. The old traditional come into the radio station, here's your list, get out on the street, good luck, here's your RAB training. Everybody should be doing that. There's my $1 if this was a Rotary meeting, Cameron. I'll be happy to pay that. But the old days. Now the new days are different than that. And it's interesting. I just finished reading Rashid Tabakawala's new book, and I would recommend this to everyone watching this webinar. It's entitled Rethinking Work. Now, Rashid Tabakawala has been a really big fan of radio and spoken at the radio show. He's very, very thoughtful. He and Erica on multiple times have sat down and had, again, some very thoughtful conversations about the world as it is and where we're going. But in his book, he specifically talks, again, this has only been out about 4 months now. He talks specifically about Gen Z, what lights their fire, what's happening in their world, what they value, what they don't. And it was one of the things that jumped out to me was, with technology being what it is today, the economy being what it is, and where Gen Z, where they are native to, not an immigrant, and that is 62%. I think the statistic was 62% of Gen Zs will have a second job. 62% within the next 2 years. Like by the time we roll into 2027, 62%. So there's a side hustle going on, but that's part of their world. So like if we're hiring Gen Z, knowing what happens in their space, we need to be aware of that. And how do we take advantage of that? How do we support that? I mentioned what's important is, as companies, what you stand for, what you do, how you connect, is very important, but also what you allow your employees to be. So I was going to give a couple of case pieces too, but big recommendation, Rethinking Work, Rashid Tabakawala. So a couple of case studies or case examples, if you will. If you have someone who wants to do multiple things, they have the ability, they have the talent to do that. Like as the leader, encouraging more of that. There is and again, this is a Central Indiana example. There is a young person who grew up wanting to be a sports broadcaster. Absolutely loved it. Very, very good at it. Came out of his high school, went to college, out of college, connected with a broadcaster who saw a larger picture. That broadcaster was able to create an opportunity for this individual where they were able to utilize their talent as a broadcaster, but then also encourage them to grow their business as a seller. And in today, a very successful broadcaster and a successful seller, again, in their very early 30s, but they've been doing it for a while. So there was a broadcaster who saw talent and created an opportunity for this younger person to do the things that they were passionate about and create those opportunities. There's another broadcaster that I'm aware of that, again, how do you get that energy in your building? How do you attract? And again, thinking specifically of Gen Z and what they bring into the workforce. They created an opportunity for individuals, and it wasn't just radio, but what they have seen is, and we at the RAB, we preach this, radio in all its forms, the multi-platform approach. They've created video digital products that are content created specifically for an audience in their market. It's geared around, again, I'm using a couple of sports analogies, but I guess that's why I have a racing helmet and a football helmet on my desk. But what they've done is they've created content that sells and content that matters in their local markets. They've created a way to get women and men. This is not just guys. This is women and men, into their operation who also have a passion for storytelling and using multiple platforms, but they brought this in. They've created a whole ecosystem around it. And, it's inside a radio station, but they were thinking differently. And it's not the traditional model at all. But again, if you think innovatively, if you think differently, there are opportunities that get presented. And the last example I'll use, and this may be a little bit outside of Gen Z, but part of this message is we have to think differently as an industry, right? And time is going to make it essential that we do. But there is also, again, this is more of a local company, but they have someone who was a very successful seller, who had long established local connections, whose husband had, from a business perspective, had to leave the community and move to a different situation. The spouse had been a longtime member of this particular community. She didn't want to leave her job. So the broadcaster thought differently and said, okay, if you can maintain relationships, which again, this would have been, off the shelf, no way would we allow this. It's working. This person is now 1,000 miles away, still calling on local business, finding a way to use technology, finding a way to use communications tools, maintaining those relationships locally, growing business. But it's because the broadcaster was willing to think differently. Those are some of the things that I think we need to make sure we stay focused on, Cameron, as we move forward as an industry.
And I want to make sure we have some time for questions. If you have those, drop those in the chat below. But when it comes to sourcing the next generation, you kind of talked about how Gen X, the boomers can't write the Gen Z recruitment strategies alone. You've got to listen, and you got to co-create any good strategies behind that.
Yeah, I think a point on that is, let's make sure we're asking Gen Z. It's not that, hey, this is a great idea we came up with and we'll use this to recruit to Gen Z, and it's a Gen X idea, or it's a boomer idea. Our hearts are in the right place, but to our target audience, let's talk to the audience. It's the same thing that we prescribe, if you will, as broadcast professionals. And that is, we go and we talk to the clients, we understand what the needs are, and then we come back with solutions, right? That's what we do. That's where the successful models happen. We should do the same thing when it comes to recruiting the next generation. And so when the RAB, from our perspective, is involved in things like our summer programs with the NRTS, the partnerships and the collaboration with the university groups, we're having those conversations. But I think as broadcasters, looking in your market to be able to have those conversations with that target group, what's important to them? What are some of those trigger points? Talk to them, and then let's build our recruitment programs around what we know matters to them.
I love that. We've got a few questions. I want to make sure we get these in. Olivia wrote in. She's 24 years old, currently a sales coordinator, studied radio broadcasting, been in her role for around 3 years. She's looking to expand her knowledge of the sales process and get more involved in the company beyond current responsibilities. What do you recommend steps that she can take to grow professionally and to transition into a more active role?
Olivia, great question, and congratulations on your career and how it is going. I default back to constantly learning, like constantly reinforcing reinforcing the information that you need, what you don't know. Are you reading all of the trades? Are you looking at client-focused information and in those categories that you're wanting to learn more about, studying their data, looking at their information? Lifetime learning, and this is for everyone from Olivia to anyone, constantly reinforcing, reinvesting in yourself is critical. So instead of waiting for someone to do that, being proactive, and that question is 100% proactive, reaching out and learning and making sure that you're availing yourself of the information that you have now, but also looking to expand that. I also want to answer Olivia's question with a comment that was shared in the Illinois Media Career Academy by Tony Coles from iHeart. And Tony, just an amazing human being. In his conversation to the students, and Olivia, this is part of my answer for you. He talked about coaches, mentors, and champions. And we all hear about mentoring, which is so important. And again, as a younger person, reaching out, trying to create those relationships. Again, it's establishing a relationship. Your network is your net worth. We reinforce that in the summer program as well. But one of the things that Tony shared with our students, which I think is appropriate for anyone, and that is, when you are looking at trying to connect with these relationships beyond what you currently have, reach out to those people that are doing what you want to do, or they already have done what you aspire to do. There's a lot of people who are your coach. They'll tell you, what you need to work on, what's going well, what's not. But when you look for a mentor, go grab someone the next higher up, and go ask. Create that network, create that relationship. Reach out to someone who is doing something that you aspire to do. And those relationships become magic through your career. So that's a part of the reinvestment process. So thank you, Olivia. Good luck.
Got another one from George, and this is a big one. What sort of base guarantee is needed these days to attract Gen Z? I know that's pretty broad here for the end. What are you seeing?
$1 million is always a good place to start. I'm sure my broadcast friends just, threw their coffee on the floor. That again, that is a situational question. That's obviously a private question between employer and employee. There's lots of research that shows what, predetermined magic numbers, are out there. I think on both sides, do your research, but have a genuine dialogue and conversation about what those needs are. The beautiful thing about, in particular in the sales business, is that as you are successful, you literally create your own economic success in your own model. You have to start. I completely get that, but there is a pathway to success for sure. But that's going to be a situational question. Nice question, though, George. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, George, and thank you, Olivia. And I wanted to just read this comment from Dennis that he dropped in there, talking about side hustles. With a little creative thinking, he says that radio can be the side hustle. And I think that that's an interesting concept there. Like you said, it's about thinking differently.
Well, Cameron, again, not to keep going back to Rashid Tabakawala's book, Rethinking Work, but he does talk a lot about fractional positions and fractional employment as something that would happen in the future. And right back to the point that was made in the chat, where the radio is the side hustle, the sales position is the side hustle. Again, we have to be open to thinking differently. What that looks like in 2027, we may not know, 2028, but just that statistic that 62% of Gen Z in the next couple of years will all have a second job. It's remarkable. But again, thinking differently and being innovative. I don't know what the answer is, but it lies out there for sure.
We're all going to figure it out together, and it's going to be a big day when we do. But, for those that are looking, there are a lot of great resources out there from, your local colleges and universities, even high schools, state broadcast associations. A lot of them are really coming up with some fantastic recruitment strategies for all areas. And, of course, the BEA you mentioned earlier and the National Radio Talent System, all really great ways to find folks if you are having troubles in that regard.
Well, we all want the same thing. So in our conversations with the state broadcast associations, what is a part of, our platform at RAB is very much about creating opportunities for the next generation. And the other piece to this too, that we don't want to lose sight of, Cameron, is the word retention. So getting Gen Zs into our ecosystem and getting them into our businesses, retaining them is also critical. And then that comes back to the conversations with our employees about what they need, constant reinforcement. When you look at the statistics of what Gen Z say they want when they're working, in terms of, and I used for Olivia, I used a mentorship example, but that's a big critical piece of that. And actually it's more desired by Gen Z than it is Gen Y. So there is research that backs that up. But once you get them in, you want to keep them and find ways for them to grow, because, you would ask a question about 15 minutes ago, where's the next Erica Farber, going to come from? They're going to come from somewhere around here. And we as broadcasters have an obligation to make sure that those bridges are built so that we can find those next great broadcasters to lead this amazing industry. And it has another great 50 years in it. I'm excited about the prospects. Technology has created so many more opportunities. We as broadcasters have to consistently and constantly embrace those.
Mike, I'm so happy you got to join me today. Of course, you're one of the biggest advocates the industry has, and we're lucky to have you in the spot right now, on this and a lot of other issues. And you mentioned some RAB resources. We'll have links to that in tomorrow's headlines, as well as the full recap from this conversation. But, thank you for what you do, and thanks for joining us today. It's been a really good conversation.
Cameron, thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate Radio Inc. and Deborah and the team. This is a very important conversation. This is our future. This is our future. So you, my friend, were one of those students who sat in the summer programs and the college programs. I don't want to embarrass you, but you personally have reinvested to make sure that students have the opportunity. We have had so much support through the industry and will continue to do so. So these things are really, really important. They're not going away. And that last point that I made, recruitment is very important, but retention is very important. So let's not take our eye off either one of those two balls. So again, thank you for the opportunity.
Mike, thank you so much. And of course, we'll see you for next month's Radio Masters Sales Series. We'll keep you posted on that. Check the Radio Inc. headlines for that announcement coming here in the next few days. Very excited about it. But thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. Hopefully you've learned a lot. You're going to put this to use, and we'll see you next time.